With David and Joan not here, and you missed the last meeting, I think we're gonna have to put off the minutes to, unless Sally. He says it's all right.
Good evening, everyone. The regular July meeting of the Planning Board will come to order.
If you would take your seats, those who are in the room, we're gonna start. Thank you.
This one. All right. There's a number of public hearings that are continuations, but they've asked to be adjourned, so I'll read them quickly. If anyone's here for that, they can leave. Michael Degan, 86 Crest Drive. Peter Bartolacci, 67 Miller Avenue. JCC on the Hudson, 371, 425 South Broadway. And Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Mary, 32 Warren Avenue. Those four public hearings, continuation of the public hearings, have been adjourned. Michael Degan is pending CBA determination, and the JCC on the Hudson is also pending ZBA determination. The next item is a continuation of the public hearing on the Artis Senior Living LLC. The public hearing on the accepted SDEIS is to be continued. That's on 153 White Plains Road. Construction of a 35,952 square foot Alzheimer's dementia residential center. And it's an amendment to allow for a floating overlay zone for the Alzheimer's dementia care in an OB zone.
This is the second night of the public hearing on the environmental impact statement for this proposal. It's actually two proposals. There's the zoning amendment, and there is the initial site plan showing how the environmental impact would be on this particular property. Relative to environmental impact, we believe that through compliance with current building, energy, and stormwater regulations, we would have no adverse impact. Relative to zoning, we are asking that you make a positive recommendation back to the trustees because we believe that our text appropriately protects the village, particularly providing a buffer between commercial kinds of uses and residential uses, making no significant impact on village services, and providing the planning board in the text maximum flexibility in site plan review to make sure that there is no impact and that there is, in fact, maximum practicable efforts made to include sustainability measures. Therefore, we are very much hoping, after you hear comments tonight, that you would close the hearing and move forward with this, including a recommendation to the trustees. We, after all, need at some point to move forward in order to know if the village will allow this use at all, because it is not currently a permitted use in the village. So we're hoping this moves forward. Thank you very much.
Okay. Does anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this application? Okay. Bob, you want to come up? Tell us your name and your address, please.
Yeah, my name is Alan Green. I live at 8 Bridge Street here in Tarrytown. I grew up in Westchester, born and bred here. Raised my 3 kids in Edgemont. Love Westchester. I've been a commercial lending officer for my whole career, over 40 years. Made commercial loans in this area to probably 100 companies. Saw it develop. Westchester I'm very proud of, and to see what has happened to it. From a dirt road I used to see on Central Avenue to great thriving businesses. I'm familiar with Transfiguration. I have friends who sent their kids to school there and familiar with the area and feel that the site would be a good site. I have no ties to anybody here except that I do know the sellers on a familiar basis, and I know they contribute to the community. I was on the board of directors and currently am on the executive board of directors for 20 years with the Boy Scouts, the Westchester Putnam Council here in Westchester. We've done a lot of good things. We have 8,000 scouts that we take care of and help. And I feel that I have some personal experience with dementia and Alzheimer's. My father had it, and my first cousin had it, and there was no place to take them that really suited them, or I had to send them out of state, which was rough for me. I feel that I've read something about artists. They've done very good jobs. I worked in New Jersey. Part of my job was in New Jersey when I worked in New York, covering healthcare, and Alzheimer's specialties and dementia specialties are really a needed thing in this country, and we have to be more conscious of the spread of it because there's an awful lot of patients, people in need. I was in the Navy for 3 years, served as an officer on a destroyer, and my honest opinion is that this site is a good site for it, and Tarrytown would be proud of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Kai Yamamoto, longtime watcher of the planning board, first-time speaker, I believe. My wife, Kimberly, and I live at 20 Browning Lane with our 2 young sons. I've been a Tarrytowner for my entire life, which is, I think, is a long time. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I was inspired to speak here this evening because I was watching the planning board meeting and I saw Ms. Raziulis mentioned that maybe the people in the community might want to come speak, so I took that as an open invitation. This also led me to read into and look at the SDEIS papers submitted by artists. And over the past month, my wife and I, we're both registered nurses. We've been walking around Tarrytown on daily morning walks, and we happened to walk past the site where this is planned for. And that inspired some conversation because I had mentioned that, oh, this is what they're going to do, because we saw the remaining sign out that said the planning board is meeting about this. We're happy and encourage a great amount of open space, and we like what the planning board has done with open space in Tarrytown. But we're also realists. We believe that development does have to happen, and it will happen here in Tarrytown. since we live in Pennybridge, we appreciate that the development wouldn't affect us per se when it comes to the school system, but we appreciate the financials that go into the planning with regard to the school board and new facilities. In doing the research for this, I found out that this, this institution will pay taxes, which is good. We welcome any opportunity for our taxes to maybe raise at a slower rate. I know they're always going to go up, but maybe they'll raise at a slower rate. One of the things that I saw in the SDEIS was that over a 30-year period, the school board is looking at maybe $12 million in anticipated revenue, which, when given the building that's going on in Sleepy Hollow and throughout the villages, I think that's a good bonus, especially for an institution that is not going to draw on the school system. So I think we should definitely embrace that. From a professional perspective, as an RN, my wife and I were talking about this. It's really important for, in our opinion, to see that there's a place for families close by. And that's for those families suffering from dementia. Now, I say families suffering from dementia, and I mean that not just the patient who needs a safe place to be, but also the family that is supporting that patient. Okay? That's something that is really important. Everybody nowadays, you ask them to volunteer their time in scouts, in the fire department, and everybody says, I'm too busy. Okay, so extrapolate that into having to go an hour to visit a loved one. Well, Little League takes precedence, or tennis takes precedence, or all of those other activities of daily living that will make you feel guilty of not traveling to see that loved one in a facility that might be distant. But if you live here in Tarrytown and you have this opportunity to have something where you can make those more frequent visits, I found it very beneficial. My parents live up in the Cresthill, so we're on a regular basis. Oh, let's just stop in. It may only be for 5 minutes, but that 5 minutes means a lot for my boys, for my parents, for us. So I think that this is something that would add value to Tarrytown. In reviewing the SDEIS, I'm in my master's program, and one of the things they were talking about is an optimal healing environment. It's not something that is really out there, but there are a bunch of hospitals that are embracing this. It's brought forward by the Samuel Institute, and it's a framework. There's 4 things. There's the environment, the interactions between the patients. One of the things that that's in the plan that I was able to read was having open spaces and gardens for the residents to walk. That fits directly in that optimal healing environment for residents and for those patients. So I think that would really be beneficial to the patients and their family members. Last thing I wanted to mention was, as a former 15-year member of the Tarrytown Ambulance Corps, this is an organization that runs on a shoestring budget, gets its funding from donations and whatever they can get from revenue recovery from the insurance companies. I'd really like to see maybe we can support them, because during the time that I worked with the Ambulance Corps, we did respond fairly often to the Tarrytown Hall Center. So if maybe there's something that we could implement to help them out, because they don't take tax money at this time, maybe that's something that we could also address. So thank you for affording me this opportunity to speak on something that I believe is going to be beneficial to our community, and welcome to the new neighbors.
Thank you very much. Oh, really?
I think you all know who I am. I'm the owner of the property right now. We've owned this property close to 15 years. and we've worked closely with the town. Dan and I have had many meetings. We've spoken and tried to work with the Board of Trustees and with the village attorney. We were fortunate enough to, originally we were going to build a 60,000-foot building on this property, which was the original plan, a 3-story office building. At that time, we had a medical group that were going to take a third of the building. And then we were fortunate enough to meet artists, and they came with a plan that was, I thought was more acceptable to the town because, A, the size of the building, I think, was 36,000 feet, smaller. I think one of the problems that Mr. Tedesco had said to me back then was he was concerned about the height. When he drove down Martling Avenue, you'd see a high building. Now this is a 2-story building instead of a 3-story building. We were speaking to the town. We explained to them that the tax base would obviously increase over what the taxes are right now. The tenant puts no pressure on the school system because senior citizens, they don't drive, so there's very little traffic coming in, just the employees and maybe visitors once in a while. Unfortunately, having a parent who had dementia, I was fortunate enough to be able to go there quite often, but most people don't have their parents visiting them. So and there's no pressure on the school system too. So I know you've been working hard to get this thing passed. I appreciate all your work and that time and effort. And I just came here to thank you for your time and effort, and hopefully that we can get this thing finished up before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? All right. Bob, you want to read your memo? Bob, you want to read your memo?
Yes. Briefly, I had summarized for the board the previous comments that made in the public hearing as well as written comments that we've received. And this is something that we will be providing to the applicant to direct them in terms of doing the FEIS, but we're going to wait until we get incorporate the comments that we've heard tonight. The additional comments originating from the board's 722 hearing, the 2 letters to be addressed in the FSEIS, the Cuddy and Feder letter in response to the artist petition, and then one that we received just a couple of days ago, the DEC letter, which was a response and comments, which is typical kind of comments that they have in terms of jurisdiction and permitting. Specific comments from the hearing held on 6/24. I will briefly just go through these. Indicate where the information is found in the SEIS process. What I did was I took the comments and then I put the specific response from the stenographer's comments in the text. There were 15 questions that were asked of them during the time that of the initial SEIS. They're all listed in the Appendix W, but the question is, where do we find the new stuff, and put that into your response. I think that Ms. Lawrence also had the same question, same line. Where did you find the information on the affordable housing? Again, it's in Appendix W. But again, we want to document that. We want to put that in as a question, and you address that in the FEIS. We also provided a number of other comments during the development of the SDIS. And I think we have 149 questions. We're not asking you to address each of those, but summarize those. For example, the village attorney had questions that specifically talked about, really grammar and other kinds of issues, and
is it conclusatory and whatever. So you would just take those comments and say, yeah, 15 comments or 20 comments from the village engineer, the village attorney, and they deal with this, that, and the other thing, and this is how we addressed it. So we're not asking you to go through 149 comments and address them. Provide comments made by the village engineer on water modeling, and we're asking you to provide further commentary in response to the engineer's comments on the modeling and institutionalize what you are planning regarding the water system going forward. And we essentially have his comments in from the stenographer's comments, okay? The manhole issue was identified. Provide more detailed implementation plans to deal with that issue, which all ties into the stormwater system and the sewer. Traffic impacts. Are there any specific additions or other conditions on the village's major roads, such as Broadway, that distinguish it from White Plains Road? I would expand that so that you're not just looking at 119 and Route 9, but the other major roads in Tarrytown, such as 9, going forward. But you'll see that in more comment here. Provide additional study and respond on renewable alternate energy methods for the project. And I put in a comments from Mr. Steples from the planning board. Describe plans for backup power for the facility. I believe that Paul had that question, Paul Burgee. What are you planning on doing backup power for the facility? And Mr. Kirkpatrick said, we'll look into that and give you an answer. I think he said that a lot in the comment. Address village recreation fees and the impact on recreation. I believe that you've received already information on that, and you can address that. Additional planning board comments. Provide the rationale for the density in the proposed legislation. Namely, you're talking about 100 units. How would this density provide a precedent for generating greater number of units for larger properties requesting a floating zone under proposed legislation? So you can put your thinking caps on that. So it's not maybe a fixed 100, it may not be 100 units per acre or whatever. It may be fixed. You need to explain that to us and see how it dovetails with the, if you have a larger, a 10-acre site, does that translate into 1,000 units? In line with the village's complete streets policy, describe providing connectivity to Route 119. This conforms to the county's CML comments by the planning. There we're talking about connectivity, where you're going to get there, how you're going to go. Are you going through Columbus Park? Are you going to do sidewalk? Are you going to do easements? How are you going to address that? Describe methods and plans to separate gray water from household wastewater. This is a comment that exploratory. There's a number of other things. Most of it deals with single-family homes, but the Green Building Council has been very proactive in terms of looking at multifamily housing now, and that's something that you could explore and address in the FEIS. I'll provide this to you. We want to take the comments tonight, and we'll add that to this. Does
Do you want to say
council have
something?
anything?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment on one statement that had been made by the applicant, which was a request that the board make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees on the zoning at this point in time, as there are certain comments that were made on the SDIS that'll have to be addressed in the SFEIS. It may be premature, especially with the comments related to density, because they directly relate to the zoning. So you may be better off holding off until you get that information so that you're in a better position to make that recommendation to the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. I fully agree with that, and you did it for me, because I think we need to have the final SEIS accepted as complete, make our findings based on that, and then hopefully out of the findings would come the recommendation to do the zoning. And once the Board of Trustees does the zoning, then it can come back to us for the site plan review on it.
And it should be noted that the DSEIS and whether the FEIS encompasses not only the zoning, but the site plan. So when they come back, then it'll just be your typical site plan review.
Sounds good.
John, I have just two comments that I'm not sure, because I don't have the report in front of me. But the analysis, the fiscal analysis for this property, do you remember what the tax generation is proposed?
I'm going to have to ask Mark. You remember Mark?
Yes, I do. It's, right, the mic. Right now, today, the property generates $24,000 total taxes as a vacant parcel, of which 15,000, a little over 15,000, goes to the school system as of now, a little less than is required to educate one child, which is about $29,000. When this facility is built, it will generate a little more than $400,000 per year total taxes to all jurisdictions. So the comparison is now 24,000, when it's built 400,000, just about exactly as it happens, 17 times as much taxes when it is built than it now generates as an empty parcel. Another way of putting that, it will generate zero. We did, of course, full fiscal impact analysis showing the increased costs to each taxing jurisdiction. How much will the increased cost be to the village? How much will the increased cost be to the fire department? How much will the increased cost be to the school system? The school system, it's easy because there will be no students generated for the schools, and it will generate $260,000. I'm sorry. Of the 400, it's about 329,000. It's enough to educate 9 students, 9 times 27, or whatever that is. So there's a tremendously positive fiscal impact. And that's all starts on page 93. For anyone who's watching this and wondering where can I find those figures, they can find them starting on page 93. The table that I'm referring to is on page 98. And there, all of the tables of the fiscal impact analysis are listed they're in a separate section in addition, and there are 2 more tables we were asked to provide in that Appendix W that the Planning Board had specifically asked for.
So I have a question for you. I don't know who has the answer to this. It's not your bailiwick, Dan. But does the Village of Tarrytown provide any financial resources to the ambulance corps?
I can answer that question for you. That's also addressed, and thank Mr. Yamamoto for bringing that up. We've addressed that in the community facilities section of the SDEIS. Mr. Ferrantino is here tonight in the blue shirt next to Mr. Silverman. As a matter of course, Artis Senior Living, unlike many healthcare providers, pays the full cost of the Tarrytown Volunteer, every ambulance corps that serves their facility, regardless of whether their individual client has insurance to cover that. So there is a very strong need across Westchester for better funding for volunteer ambulance corps. As you may be aware, the Village of Ossining is passing a new law that will require the billing of those services. Tarrytown does not yet have that law. However, Artis Senior Living will pay the entire cost of every ambulance visit. Further, as we've explained in the SDEIS, they have a medical director. Artis will have a medical director on site at all times, and there will be a triage. They'll treat what they can on site. What they cannot treat on site, they'll treat right next door at another of Mr. Silverman's properties at the urgent care of Westchester. They have the full Columbia doctors there as well for a slightly elevated level of care. However, certain of these senior citizens will, from time to time, require emergency transport to a tertiary care facility. They'll have to be taken ASAP to Westchester Medical Center. And that will be, we will call Tarrytown, the medical director will call Tarrytown Ambulance Corps or Empress, and in every event, those services will be reimbursed in full.
And why would it be Westchester Medical Center and not Phelps?
Because they have, depending upon the nature of the emergency, Westchester Medical Center is a tertiary care facility. So if people come in with burns over 80% of their body, they come from a 7-county range by helicopter. If there's a baby being born that's 12 ounces at birth weight, they can take care of those emergencies. Phelps is certainly will be wherever we can go to Phelps as a first choice, we certainly will. But there's going to be the issue of transport time and the nature of care. If it's going to be a quadruple bypass stat, it's going to be Westchester. I don't mean to, I'm no expert on this, but basically that.
But, just as a lead to Stanley's question, I think there's also an issue of not only the artist would be paying for the service, but what does this, does this mean an additional burden on the ambulance service? Because we talked about this, it's the same issue as if you have to hire another policeman or if you have to get another, sanitation truck. So the question is, would the ambulance corps be, burdened by this? And not just a question of paying, but how does that affect the ambulance corps?
Artists now, I can answer that. I think it is also in the SDEIS in terms of how often will this happen? How often will an ambulance be called to a 64-bed Alzheimer's dementia care facility? And the answer on that is about 1.5 times per month, 1.5 ambulance trips per month. And that's based on all of the facilities that they already have up and running. So they've got an actual apples for apples basis. They can say, we have 10 facilities of 64 beds each. Based on our experience with those facilities, they can estimate very closely how many people are likely to need.
It just sounds incredibly low to me. Is there a way we could get, is there some other verification for that?
Mr. Ferentinos is here. We can certainly provide the statistical background for that, and if you would like.
I hope it is. I just.
Yeah.
But again, we get a lot of figures, and sometimes they're not. When the reality strikes, it's and again, it's a tax. I think I'm pleased with the basic idea of the facility, but I think that we just have these ancillary questions that we just don't want to have surprises later on. That's all.
It's a legitimate concern. It's a big problem for ambulance corps all over Westchester County. Some municipalities have adopted new legislation, something for Tarrytown, but regardless of any new legislation, Artist Senior Living as a corporate policy takes care of 100% of the municipal costs.
Could you, in terms of the FEIS, could you address that specific question? Basically, you talked about different levels of care. You talked about the statistical background for that, and maybe there's some even is there a cost per ambulance? Even though you're paying that, you want to be able to say that too.
Yes, we'll be happy to do that. The information you just asked for is already in the SDEIS.
Right. Again, in the FEIS, it's a question. And you're bringing it out, and people can see it right there.
Absolutely, happy to do that.
See, I think the issue is they're prepared to pay the full cost of every service rendered, but the infrastructure costs or the fixed capital costs of the building and the ambulances and the replacement of the ambulances and the wear and tear, that's often not included in their bill. So what I think would be useful is if you spoke to them and said, what are the additional costs that you could proportionately contribute to in the long term for structural improvements of the building that they have to operate or for the equipment that they need, including the equipment in the ambulance itself? Because usually when they price it out, they just price services rendered and not the full cost.
I agree with Mr. Chairman. That's a legitimate concern, and that is something certainly we can talk with the representatives of the Volunteer Ambulance Corps and get an idea of their overall cost structure not just operating, but capital, and see, and be sure that we're making a reasonable contribution.
But again,
Because
following
even
up-
the cost of training additional people should be included in that, because
Yep.
they would probably, if the demand exceeded what was stated in the report, which it might happen, people get ill, you may take an older clientele in over time, so that it may increase the use of the need for ambulances. It would be nice to have the ambulance corps be prepared to handle that with the requirements of increased training personnel, selecting and recruiting personnel should be included in the cost structure.
Absolutely, and the training is critically important, and it's recurring, the fact that you know how to operate all of today's monitors doesn't mean you'll be prepared now.
You may want to put that in context. So in other words, it'd be very interesting to know, on average, or on a monthly basis, how many ambulance calls do they actually make? And what's the time involved with that and whatever? That would then give you if it's 1.5, and that takes a certain amount of hours, and the rest of it is, I don't know, 10 or 20, I don't know what it is. It might give the board an idea of what is the context of it. That's all.
And also to expand upon that context, I will reach out to my colleagues in Ossining and other municipalities that have gotten together to address this problem and have a broader statistical basis for the nature of the impact.
And just a question for the village attorney. Is there any provision within the village code that would be similar to a recreation fee for something like this? That would have the impact? No, we'd have to look at doing that maybe for the future. If
You're
it's
the attorney.
allowed.
I don't think that there
What's
is.
that? I don't believe so, but we can certainly double check that. And if appropriate, submit a written comment during written comment period if the board is inclined to
And
move
maybe
forward
for the
with that.
future, something would be a good idea to look at if it's possible.
See if there's a possibility for a text amendment just on a more general basis.
Well,
Understood.
You're very familiar with Austin, too, so.
Right,
See what
yeah.
they're doing up there.
Mark, I was struck by the comment, one of the previous speakers that was a nurse, sent something about the holistic notion of having outdoor recreational passive spaces. I'm looking at the site plan as it exists now.
Yes.
The area to the left, going toward the aqueduct, where's the property line? And is that actually a live water body that is filled
Yeah.
with water continuously?
No, it is not. This is the detention pond that was built in 2015. There is no continuous water body. That's to say, there is no flowing brook that goes down through this property. All of the catchment areas on this property, of course, are delineated in the stormwater management report. When this was built in 2015, it was sized to take not only the runoff from this pervious parking lot here, but also it was sized to fully incorporate the runoff from this. To answer your question, where is the property line? The property line of this parcel, which is 4.6 acres, is this dark black line that I'm tracing with my fingers there, about 600 feet of frontage on Martling Avenue, 430 down in this direction. It's contiguous with the Marshall Cavendish Publishing out along this line, and it adjoins the remaining 8 acres that are a different parcel owned by Mr. Silverman that incorporates this pervious parking lot.
So my question is, are you going to use the green space to the south, to the west of the building for parkland or for gardens, or I'm not.
It will be open space forever. The short answer is, in terms of the recreation for the residents, no. That will be restricted. The residents are under what's called routine protective oversight. That's to say that they cannot be permitted to wander off on a garden path. I have familiarity with my own family with that issue. So the gardens are extraordinarily well designed and landscaped. They're an actual model for the industry, because when people are looking for a place to take mom or dad, they're looking for a place that they want them to be happy. And this landscaping that I'm pointing out here will be extraordinarily well done. Thanks to Kathleen Snyder, who's here, raise your hand, please. They've done, so let me say, this area here, this is the area for the residents. It is, can only be reached through the building itself, and it's a beautifully landscaped area for all of the residents to walk in these paths, often hand in hand with a caregiver, one-on-one. These areas here, the retaining walls would be extraordinarily well landscaped, but this area, Dr. Friedlander, here is quite steep. This will not be used for recreation. This will be permanent open space forever, and it'll be attractively landscaped, but the primary function of this is for that detention pond.
Okay, I look forward to discussing that in the site plan about the size of that gardens and whether it's adequate, but you can tell me then, not now.
Questions I can answer?
Any other question for the board? Okay, so let's
Okay.
continue this.
I'm going to move that we close the public hearing tonight on the draft SEIS, and we ask the applicant to prepare the final SEIS, which will address all substantive comments made during the public hearings and also written comments made during the 10-day comment period which will follow this meeting. The final SEIS should also address all comments made by staff and council during the production of the draft SEIS, and it should incorporate the draft SEIS by reference.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
Yeah.
Carries unanimously.
Point of clarity, the public, even if they weren't here tonight, can still submit written comments, and they would do that to Liz Mazzaro's.
And that refers to not just the people watching, but anybody in the audience who on their ride home says, oh my God, that's the question I should have asked. You've got 10 days, so send us the comments.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving to new public hearings. The first one is Michael and Angela Coffey. I'll read the public hearing notice. Please take notice that the Planning Board of the Village of Tarrytown will hold a public hearing on Monday, July 22nd, 2019, at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 1 Depot Plaza, Tarrytown, New York, to hear and consider an application by Michael and Angela Coffey, 100 MacArthur Lane, Tarrytown, New York, for site plan approval for additions and alterations to a single-family home. Property is located on 100 MacArthur Lane, Tarrytown, New York, and is shown on the tax maps as sheet 1.70, block 29, lot 16, and is in the R 7.5 zone. The documents are available for inspection in the Planning and Zoning Office. All interested parties are invited to attend and be heard. Access to the meeting room is available to the elderly and the handicapped. A signing is available for the hearing impaired. A request must be made to the village clerk at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. Additional approval is required by the Architectural Review Board. By order of the Planning Board, Elizabeth Ferreira, Secretary to the Planning Board, dated July 12, 2019.
Members of the board, for the record, my name is Sam Vieira. I'm the project architect. Mr. Michael Coffey, the owner, is also present here this evening. As I stated in my letter to the board with this application, we are effectively putting a second story above an existing single-story home at 100 MacArthur Avenue. The present home is approximately 1,000 square feet. It is a two-bedroom home, and the Coffeys have 3 daughters. So needless to say, the situation is a little cramped there. So we are effectively adding a second story to turn it into more of a traditional home where we have 3 bedrooms upstairs with 2 baths. We'll maintain a bedroom on the first floor, sort of a mud area, laundry area out in the back where one of the bedrooms is now, maintain the kitchen and living room where it is. We are before you simply because of the expansion exceeds 50% of the existing square footage. We are not changing the footprint of the house with the exception of a newly designed and incorporated front porch. which will protrude 5 feet out from the house and approximately 22 feet across. We thought that that would be a nice architectural element to break up the facade. And we are also overhanging at the rear of the property by about 2 feet, which accounts for the difference in square footage that you might have seen, 1,000 versus 1,077 as the actual addition. Other than that, the hardscape stays the same. We are going to modify the walkways a little bit because the access to the front is slightly different. Different from my letter, from the time that I wrote the letter and the time that the original denial letter was issued. There was a design of a more traditional type of roof that encroached upon the light plane. After review and discussing this with the applicants, they chose to ask me to modify the roof plane slightly so that we were out of that light plane. So therefore, we will not need to go to the zoning board for any variances for this project. We will continue to need to go for the ARB, as previously stated.
Okay. Anyone wish to comment from the audience on this application? Anyone on the board? Anyone on the staff? Okay.
Okay, I'm going to first move that we declare that the code action a type 2 action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Paul, you're up.
We move to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, this is on the application of Michael and Angela Coffey. Only a portion of the resolution will be read, but a copy of the general and specific site plan conditions will be provided to the applicant, and the entire site plan approval resolution will be recorded in the minutes of this meeting. Application of Rohit Sareen. Property is 100 MacArthur Lane, sheet 1.70, block 29, lot 16, and zone R 7.5. Resolution of the site plan approval. Background. 1, the applicant requested site plan approval for the construction of additions on a single-family residence located at 100 MacArthur Lane in the R 7.5 zoning district. These additions included a second-story addition plus a covered front porch and open rear deck. 2, the planning board on July 22nd, 2019 determined that this to be a type 2 action under New York State DEC 617.5C11, construction or expansion of a single-family or two-family or a three-family residence on an approved lot, and therefore no further secret review is necessary. 5, in response to comments from the building inspector, village engineer, the architect revised the design of the roof to bring it into compliance with light plane exposure section of the code. This is shown on sheet A3, light plane study of the applicant's submitted plans. Determination. The planning board determines that based upon the findings and reasoning set forth below, the application for site plan approval is granted, subject to the conditions set forth below. 1, finding. The planning board considered the standards set forth in Village of Tarrytown Zoning Code, Chapter 305, Article 16, and finds that, subject to the conditions set forth below, the proposed site plan is consistent with the site plan design and development principles and standards set forth therein. Except as otherwise provided herein, all work shall be provided in strict compliance with the plan submitted to the planning and approved by the planning board as follows. 3, general conditions. A, prerequisites to signing site plan. The following conditions must be met before the planning board chair may sign the approved site plan, also known as final site plan.
I then
That's
move
it.
that the planning board approve the proposed site plan.
Is there a second?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I believe there was originally a typographical error in the name of the application. So if you could just do it with a friendly amendment as it reads now, application of Michael and Angela Coffey.
Oh, right.
Oh,
It
yes.
was on Ms. Roberts.
Yes,
Sorry.
okay, yes,
I apologize for
absolutely.
interrupting.
Yeah, it's for the application of Michael and Angela Coffey. So on the motion
Is there a
to
second?
approve?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously.
Thank you all. Good night.
You're welcome. Good luck. Okay. The next new public hearing for Raul Bello, 13 John Street, site plan approval. I'll read the public for construction of a single-family dwelling. I'll read the notice. Please take notice, the Planning Board of the Village of Tarrytown will hold a public hearing on Monday, July 22nd, 2019, at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 1 Depot Plaza, Tarrytown, New York, to hear and consider an application by Raul Bello for a site plan approval for construction of a single-family residence. The property is located at 13 John Street, Tarrytown, New York, and is shown on the tax maps as sheet 1.70, block 34, lot 7, and is in the RR zone. The documents are available for inspection in the Planning and Zoning Office. All interested parties are invited to attend and be heard. Access to the meeting room is available for the elderly and handicapped, and the sign is available for the hearing impaired. Request must be made to the village clerk at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. Additional approval is required by the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Architectural Review Board. By order of the Planning Board, Elizabeth Nazaris, Secretary of the Planning Board, dated July 12, 2019. You're on.
Good evening. My name is Raul Bello. I am the architect for Dorothy and Manny Aguiar, the owners of 13 John Street. They're here this evening. They've been longtime residents of Tarrytown. Manny's been here for around 35 years. They've raised 3 children here. They are building this house for one of their sons, Daniel. Daniel is also here this evening. Daniel would like to live in this house and hopefully raise his family here as well. I have the site plan here. I've outlined it. So the yellow is the new single-family home that we are proposing. The blue at the rear signifies or shows the new deck. Front porch is in red, and I've got a new driveway hatched here. Garage would be underneath, and parking spot in the driveway. So we feel that what we are proposing here, the single-family home, is going to be in keeping with the existing character of the neighborhood. It is a tight neighborhood. They're tight lots. This lot is a small lot. It's very, very undersized. Anything that would be built here is going to require several variances. We're going to require several variances to be able to build this house. So we are going to have to go to the zoning board. We are going to have to go to the architectural board. We feel that this house is not going to cause any adverse effect on the natural environment of the neighborhood. We are providing parking for 2 cars, 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway. There was once a house on this lot. The house has been demolished. The existing survey here shows the vacant lot as it is today.
When was the house demolished?
I am not sure when the house was demolished. Do you know when the house was demolished?
I think the village would know better because the village demolished the house, but I would say probably 5 to 7, at least 5 to 7 years ago.
I believe it was 2013.
2013. And what the size of the lot is 7,500 square feet? So it's
Excuse me?
The size of the lot is, it meets the 7,500 square feet?
No, no, it does not.
So-
The size of the lot is 8,175. It's a very, very small lot, 32 feet wide. So we're gonna need several variances in order to build this. But anything that gets built on this lot is gonna require several variances.
Do you have a streetscape?
I do.
By the way, the actual zoning requirement for the lot is 20,000 square feet.
How much?
20,000.
It's close, eh?
So this is the streetscape here. This is the house that we're proposing, the house to the left, and the house to the right. And I have photographs as well.
And what's the setback on each house on the left and the right and the rest of the street? And what's the setback on this proposed house?
The setback for our house is 30 feet. So we're trying to maintain the front yard setback. And then if you take a look at the site plan here, so the house to the right is about 15 feet off the property line, and this one might be around 10 feet.
Is there a reason why you wouldn't want to be in more conformity with the neighbors on that?
Well, one of the reasons why we did that is because we wanted to have a garage,
Right.
right? And in order for us to get down to the garage, we need a certain amount of slope. So that's why, I mean, and also I wanted to get 2 cars, parking for 2 cars. So if we have parking for 2 cars, I don't need that variance because we're required 2-car parking.
Right. I'm certainly not opposed to the house being there, it's just, this is basically 3 lots off of Main Street, and there's certainly an historic character, or at least a very, there's a certain conformity there, which I think, I don't know if this would be, you know, in the best interest of that or not, I don't know. It seems
Well,
like it's.
I also know that this particular neighborhood is very, very tight neighborhood. Parking is
Right.
also an issue. So we were trying to alleviate that by providing as much parking as we possibly could on the site.
Right.
So this would eliminate having parking for this house on the street.
Right, but does that have?
Parking for the neighbors.
I guess the question I have is that, does that outweigh the aesthetic look of the street by pulling that house back and everybody else is on the, you know, basically 10 feet from the curb? I'm just putting it out there to you as an architect.
Okay. I think that in this case, possibly the parking might be pretty important as well. I think parking on the street, from what I understand, is very, very tight.
Because in my mind, this house is basically forever, and the parking situation, I don't think is forever. I think we will get to the point at somewhere down the line where parking will be less important because of improvements to transportation and things like that. So that's just where I'm, just my thoughts on it.
But what the largest, is the lot size is the biggest variance you're requesting?
The lot size?
Yeah.
I believe that would be the biggest one, yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's very large.
Yeah, it is. Now it is an existing non-conforming lot, right? There was once a house on here.
Right.
So, I mean, I could argue that we're not subdividing, right? We're not reapportioning. So it is an existing non-conforming lot.
I understand. I've just noticed that, that's all.
Well, yeah, we need several variances.
Yeah,
There's a
I
lot
see
of
that.
variances here, yeah.
I see there's a,
One thing that would be very helpful is a streetscape showing all the houses, so we could see where your proposal really, what it looks like compared to that street.
Okay. When you say all, you mean like maybe 2 or 3 other houses on either side?
Yeah, on either side, yeah.
Well, if
Okay.
you were standing, let's say, in the middle of John Street, let's say near the corner of John and Main, and then you were looking down the street at a slight angle, you'd see you know, if you go on John Street, you've seen it. You know, that their houses are all pretty much in a row, and then it'll be interesting to see what this house would look like, and the fact that it's set back, it would be an anomaly, that's all I'm saying. And again, I'm not saying it's, you know, this is what we're here to take a look at and see what would be the best thing for everybody. You know?
You may also, if you're going to ZBA, it may also be helpful to provide the size of all the lots. I think just visually, they seem to be very similar to, maybe a little bit bigger than yours, but it'd be interesting to know that this is 5,000, this is 4,000, this is 3, you know, whatever, so that gives you an idea.
For ZBA?
Yeah, just a
Saying?
copy of the tax, even, and for the planning board as well. Just a copy of the tax map, you know, of the street, actually, would be certainly sufficient.
And I think also, we know that the houses are very close there, so it would be interesting too to know what is the space, you know. I know, you know, it's what it is. I'm not suggesting you can't do miracles on this. If there's a house there, it's gonna be a certain configuration and a certain space, so we know that's gonna happen, but it's just to know how it's gonna, let's say, be different or be similar to the other homes.
I can tell you this, I can tell you that the house that we're proposing has got more space between the adjacent properties than the old house.
That's good to know, yeah, that's good to know. But it goes farther back on the lot, I guess.
It does go farther back, yes.
And the height is similar to the other homes on the street, the height?
If you can take a look at the streetscape, it is pretty similar. In the back, as the property does slope towards the back, so at the back it's gonna be higher, but at the front, you can see it's pretty similar in height to the houses adjacent.
Do the houses adjacent to it have similar side yard variances in existence now? That is to say, you have 3 feet and 2.5 feet side, it says here, 2.6 for one side and 3 feet for the other side.
So, yeah, the house to the left is 1 foot away from the property line.
1 foot?
And the house to the right is 3.5 feet away from the property line.
So
So similar.
There are virtually no side yards.
There's almost no side. I mean, these are tight lots here.
Well, tight
Very
is-
tight.
Is an understatement.
Yeah.
For all of them. I mean, if-
Yeah, all of the houses are tight, yeah.
No, they
Yeah.
are.
This is very helpful.
Yeah.
Should also note that the rear of the property is the South Washington parking lot, so there's no other homes in back of it, it's just parking, surface parking.
For all the houses over there, or it's
Well, it goes, not all of them, but it goes 2 or 3 houses,
In,
and then
yeah.
you have the parking lot.
right. Okay.
I have this map here, I don't know if this helps you. So the property is outlined in yellow, so you can see the parking lot in the back.
Right. You see this, you're gonna see it again.
Yeah, it is our,
Very tight.
yeah, oh, yeah, they're all like that.
You visited it? Or you going to?
Oh, I've been on that, we had a couple other, yeah, houses on that street that
Yeah.
came in for variances, yeah.
This is, the old house that was there.
Oh.
I mean, the other question is that this would virtually be the only new home on the entire street, from Main Street to Franklin.
Yes.
So, I mean, and again, I'm just asking you as an architect, I mean, that's a challenge, I think, in some ways, because it's always a question between conformity and then doing something that might be a little bit different in a positive way. And that's kind of a tough thing to, you know, I think you probably thought about this a lot before you started designing it, I would think.
It's difficult, and this lot is challenging.
Yeah, no, I don't mean, I mean the lot itself, but I mean you know, the massing of the house and the roof lines and the whole package. I mean, that's kind of a thing. I think it's a struggle because, again, you know, you have a street that's been there virtually forever, and now because of the fact that original home was taken down, you're putting something in its place, and I think that's you know, a challenging effort on your part being the architect.
It was challenging.
It's very
yes.
difficult. Also, I think most of the houses on the street were built in the early 1900s or the late 1800s. So, you know, this is like the new house.
It
This will
is.
definitely be the newest
Yeah.
on the street.
But we think it's going to be overall an improvement to the street overall.
Mhm.
Okay. Mark?
Anybody in the audience want to make any comments?
You have notified the neighbors, the neighbors have been notified, right?
Please come up and tell us your name.
Come up.
Hello. So,
Could you give us your name and address, please?
you got it. Tim Leonard, 11 John Street. So north side of the property, 13 John Street.
Mhm.
My wife Julianne Aloya. So first off, we're pretty happy if anything happens to that lot, besides the big, you know, mess that it is and has been for years. But, you know, in looking at the plans briefly, in full disclosure, our architect is Sam Vieira, who's just here, and my wife works for him. So we went over it with him really briefly because he was away on vacation. But we had some questions and concerns regarding the plans, and I'll just lay these out and you guys can kind of help me through them. And I think some of it, and one of the biggest things, Mr. Berge, if I'm saying that right? Berge. I think you reiterated a lot of, one of the main things that we have is like the kind of the integrity and historic aspect of the neighborhood. That's part of the reason, we've spent a lot of time trying to restore what our current house is and what it was. And most people in this room probably know better than me, who's lived there for 10 years, what that lot for 13 John was before. So yeah, it means a lot to us. So in regards to when we were looking at the plans, and it's difficult to look at them because I was looking at them from pictures that my wife took on a cell phone. So when walking up the street, it seems like there's 3 retaining walls now, like in the front of 13 John in the proposed lot. And I was trying to understand what those are. So to me, I think it's because the driveway goes down, slopes down pretty much, and then the walkway goes either straight or up to steps that go up about, 7 to 10 feet or so. So the front door seems to be starting where our second floor starts, is how I see it. I could be off on there, so keep me honest, but that's one thing that stood out to me when looking at that. I'm trying to see, because you already said some of the things that concerned us, which is great. Yeah, the setback overall just was trying to figure that out, because it is set back pretty far. And to put it in relative terms, our kitchen is in the back of the house. I think the front door starts at our kitchen. And so the majority of the house is stretching into the back with the deck. So aesthetically from the front, it will be set back quite a bit, I think, if I'm reading this right. I think, even if you want to fit a car in front of a garage, that I think most of this is because of, you're trying to get a garage in there, which I totally get that. But it seems like you can move the house forward and still get a variance to do that. But understand that there's a lot of variances. We know, we live them, so I get that. Let me see what else we had here. So one of the things to kind of help us see this, and I know there were already some requests here, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to make this request, but it would be great to cut the growth down and stake out the footprint of the house to actually see like where it is. I'm trying to visualize that, and it's difficult to do. So I think that would go a long way for us and probably help the review boards and the neighbors, just for the impact there. And then the other thing I was trying to figure out and this is not a big deal to me. I mean, I feel like they're trying with some of the architecture in the neighborhood, but they're trying to fit a lot into a small area. So I was wondering if it was a modular house. That one, I was trying to figure out if it is or it isn't. Okay. Yeah, and I didn't know if that is part of the reason that you're kind of restricted in what you can do or not, because I'm not that familiar with them. But one of the things is, I noticed it's a 3.5-story home versus all of ours are 2.5-story. So I don't really understand that either. Okay. What the need is there. Like, I'm not sure why it can't be flat, like with the rest of the houses. But overall, like I said, I appreciate, making the effort to even have a circle window in there, which matches the circle window that we have on ours. I think that's pretty cool. But, there's some it's really challenging to visualize, like, the end result on a piece of paper. But that's it. Thanks for listening and consideration.
Maybe in addition to staking the property, if we could get I don't think it'd be too difficult to get an elevation, maybe with a piece of 1x3 or something that would be put into the ground and then show the elevation of the first floor. Because it sounds like I haven't really studied this closely, but it sounds like there's a big disparity between the other first floor elevations and when this one's going to be. So I think if it's just something as simple as a couple of sticks of wood that would give the top of the,
You could do a balloon test too, just to see the
Yeah,
whole height of
except
the
that it's windy.
thing.
No, I'm kidding.
Well,
I'm kidding,
I know,
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
many times it is, but that's really a good measure for, people in the neighborhood and for the board.
I'm not
A
really
balloon test,
familiar
the
with that, but that's okay.
architect knows.
I trust you.
You can just put a balloon up, and we'll show the height of the proposed building.
Oh, got it, okay.
What is the driveway distance from the street to the beginning of the house to the garage? What's the driveway length?
It's 30 feet, because we put the house at 30 feet.
So why did you pick 30 feet?
I'm sorry?
The car isn't 30 feet long. Why'd you pick 30 feet? For the parking on the driveway, why'd you pick 30?
That's the sidewalk.
30 feet is so we wouldn't need a front yard variance. I was trying to reduce the number of variances. That was one of the reasons why we did that.
What is the front yard supposed to be?
30 feet.
Oh. But since you're asking for a lot of variances, you might ask for that variance, though. I mean,
We could take a look at that.
If it addresses some of the concerns of the neighbors, and it doesn't affect your ability to have two parking spaces off-site, it's worth thinking about making it a little closer to the street, the building.
We could. It's going to increase what we're asking for as far as the front yard parking.
Yeah.
We're asking for, providing 12, we're asking for 18, so we're going to increase that, and we're going to ask for a front yard now. So, we're going to be asking for more. I mean, I know we're asking for a lot, so.
You're also gonna have an issue with the driveway slope.
So,
That parking is for a car underneath the garage, to get the two cars on that site. So the further forward you pull it to the street,
The farther up I have to raise the house.
the house goes up, because it's drive under. If you pull it forward to the street line, that means the driveway gets steeper, because the elevation of the street is fixed, or the other option is to pull the house up, and now we have other issues, we get into number of stories.
The other thing I think would be helpful is how many homes on the street have, number one, driveways, how many have garages, and kind of get a feel for that, because, again, I don't mean to be, critical of it at this point, but it just seems that the whole, what's driving the design of the house is the need for a garage and a driveway, when it kind of like the setting kind of says you're kind of trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Looking at it offhand.
Yeah.
So the thought would be, I just don't know the wisdom of trying to design a house that is so kind of fighting what's there on the street. So that's just a thought of my, initially.
We really would like to get a garage, and I think what we're talking about is maybe having to get rid of the garage.
But there are other houses on the street that do have, do other houses on the street have a garage?
Yes.
So I mean, would it be possible to do a different design that would have and I think the house that was there had a garage.
None of the homes on that street with this size lot have a garage.
None.
There's no garages there. The only ones you have, some parking areas, I believe is 23, few houses down, they proposed a parking area. They've gone and actually created curb cuts to try and get
Right.
off-street parking.
Right.
So that's kind of a prime real estate to have off-street parking, so. The only other suggestion I can see here, if the board, what I'm hearing from everybody is they wanna see that house pulled forward, and you might wanna consider this. Is it possible to construct the basement completely out of concrete and have a concrete slab? Therefore, you pull the house forward, you increase your front yard variance, and then you have your garage on that same level. Just a thought. I know there's a cost associated with that. That way you can pull your house forward, you can still maintain your parking, your two-car parking on site.
Mm-hmm.
There's another alternative, if it's possible. Could you get a right-of-way through that back parking garage and come into the back of the property through that parking lot?
I don't think you'd ever be able to maneuver that, because it's only It's barely, what, 32 feet wide is the entire lot.
Nobody's talking about parking there and then having a walk or something, right?
No, driving in
You lose the
on the
space
right
in
of way,
the-
and then
you
come
lose
in,
the
make a
space in
a
the-
turn,
There's-
and have the garage at the back of the house.
Go through the
There's
parking.
a difference.
You'd have to take
No, you can't go,
off of the parking lot.
you can't go through the back. That elevation grade change is what, at least?
3 feet, give
Oh,
or
in the
take?
back, between
think
your,
so. I
your
think
grade
it
and our
says-
parking lot? It's,
Back here?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna be at least 10 feet.
Top of the wall, 108, bottom of the wall, 105. So I think it's like 3 or 4 foot difference.
Between the two? I don't think so.
No.
But that would mean killing a space in the municipal parking lot, which I think would be a stretch.
Yeah, that would be a stretch.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
You're getting 2 more spaces on John Street that way. You're gaining a
Borrowing from
space.
Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah. Well, if there's a garage built, it would be moot. And how far, what, is that parking lot affiliated with the, Y? No.
No, that's owned
It's
by the
another
village.
block away.
Yeah,
The way
That's
the
blocked.
Y has been listed.
So this is the relatively new parking lot.
yeah.
This is the,
Well.
yes, the South Washington Street parking lot.
Right. At least it was imaginative.
Yes.
Thinking outside the
Good
box.
try. yes.
Outside the
Thinking
box.
Outside the box, outside, way outside.
On another planet, as they say.
Anybody else in the audience want to make a comment? Please come up, give us your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Romy Peck. This is my partner Jonathan Dzinski, and we live at 15 John Street, so the house to the south.
Can you speak a little louder?
We live at 15 John Street, which is the house to the south. We also had some questions and concerns. I think a lot of them have already been covered here, but starting with questions, there is a section, so right here, that is sticking out. That is the part that will be closest to our house. And that's where the distance between our houses would be, I think it's 2 feet, 7 inches, 7.5 inches. And so our question was, what is that? Again, we were on vacation last week, so we got the pictures from Juliana, our neighbors, and Tim. So that it was a little bit hard to see. But it sounds like there may also be a gas line close on our side of the house that we wanted to know what that was for and had concerns about that. And then the last piece was there is, when we moved in, so to answer the question about when was the house taken down, that was in 2014 because that's when our first daughter was born and she was a baby. So that was very exciting to see the bulldozer and the guy with the cigar, and he was very good. But we were really excited to see the house come down. We always thought that it would come down and something nice would be put up next door. So there's I think when the house foreclosed, there was an existing chain link fence between our house and the property, and then when the house foreclosed, they put up another chain link fence that runs all the way along the side of the property that's on our side, and it's like attached, it's like enmeshed with the existing chain link fence. So our question was, what is the plan for that? Our concerns really are the proximity of the house to our house. We're concerned about fire safety, snow removal, ice, and then maintenance, because with the existing fence, either side wouldn't be able to maintain that side of the house. We have a really hard time. I think it was mentioned there's about a foot between our house and the property line, which we can't do anything about. So we have a hard time maintaining that side of the house, and with the fence there, it's virtually impossible. Is there anything else?
I'd just like to underscore that our concern with the proximity, the setback. Our house to the 17 John Street, our houses are about 4 feet apart. And I mean, our houses were built in 1890 something. So obviously a lot has changed in the time since then, and we have current setbacks for reasons. And I understand that it's gonna have to be close, but I think we could do better than what we had 130 years ago. So that's my main concern.
hope.
Yeah.
I don't know why that chain link fence is there. Why is the chain link fence, it looks like there are two of them, right?
The fence that was there is a temporary construction fence to keep people out in the meanwhile,
While they
from
were
when they
tearing-
demolish the house till something takes place. So that's not a permanent fence.
Oh, great, oh, okay,
Okay.
that makes sense, yeah.
Are you gonna have a fence?
We're not proposing a fence. It's part of the application.
Okay. So there would be no fence then between the two properties?
That would be great. That would be
Which
the
would
most
be.
ideal.
Make it easier for
which would
everybody.
be-
to work
Which
on.
would
Take
allow
care
people
of
to
that.
get into and repair something on, for both houses.
I mean, we're, sorry, not to cut you off, but also concerned, like if there was, like a fire in the back or somebody who needed to
Right,
get
they have to-
access to the back, like how would they?
Right.
Is the primary access going to be from the back door to the, on the deck to the backyard? Or will there also be pathways on the sides?
Right.
Now, the lot width is, again, what? What is the?
32.
32, and the house is 30?
The house is 25.
25?
25. So we have
3 and 2?
We have 4 feet on one side and 3 feet on the other.
And they have 2 feet on their side, so it's like 6 feet?
Okay, so
They don't have
what
two.
they have
They only have 1.5 here
Oh.
and 2 there.
So over here, I think what they were referring to is this little bump out here.
Yeah, right.
That's a one-story bump out for the fireplace. So the width of this is 4 feet. So from here to the property line, we have 2 foot 7.5. But the rest of the house, we have 4 feet,
I see.
which is, I believe before the old house, there was, I think 3 feet, 3.06. So we're actually improving this side a little bit, except for this little bump out there. And then on this side here, we have 3 feet from the property line to the house. And I believe before there was 1.5 feet, I think.
So it's improved?
So it's improved. Both sides have improved except for that little bump right there.
Would it be possible to switch that over, or do you actually even need the bump? Dan, you want to say anything?
Well, I'd have to take a look at the plan and see if we can maybe push that in a little bit.
Now, when you refer to fireplace, this is one of the direct vent fireplaces. It's dual tube, so you can't do it internally to the house or have, so the wall straight and then you have like a mantle and build it into the house inside?
It's possible, it's just, just like everything else on this site, the house itself also is tight.
Right, because if you go this route, then you're actually violating some state codes, which requires a sprinkler system.
We are sprinklering the whole house.
Okay.
The whole house is being sprinklered.
But your enclosure around that fireplace is gonna have to be non-combustible materials to satisfy the building codes, because you're less than 3 feet.
From the other property.
Correct.
Yeah, I think all of this, the whole side has to be, right? Non-combustible.
You have a 5-foot rule with no, so you have no openings on that side. Is that correct? No windows?
Windows, you're saying? No, we do have windows on that side.
We're gonna have to evaluate that, but that's gonna be, make sure it's code compliance as far as the setbacks from the property line.
And you have more room on the other side, though. You have to facing the other house.
We have more room on this side?
Yeah. Well, because it goes further back, their house on that side stops. You go back further than the other house, I think.
You're saying we could push this house that way?
Or move the fireplace or whatever
Right.
else.
Okay. I could take a look at that.
Okay, you wanna have a motion?
I just have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Dan, as far as you know, John Street has no landmarks, or, I mean, it's only, this is 2 lots off of Main Street, and I'm just, it's as close as you can get to the Main Street Historic District without, and I think most of the houses on John Street are probably, like I said, late 1800s, maybe some early, 1900s, and I'm concerned about, John Street, I think, is one of the more unique streets in the village, and, I'm not, I know you have a tough thing here, but I'm just concerned about something being inserted that seems to me on the surface to be kind of drastically different from the other homes on the street. And again, this house is basically forever, so I'm just concerned about that.
Just to follow on Paul's comment, because it struck me as well, we are doing a lot of work with trying to preserve the historic nature of the village. Planning Board is working with the Historic Committee, and you're going to go before the Architectural Review Board as part of the process.
Correct.
And they're going to have that in mind when they look at it. So take a look at all the houses on the block and make your architecture, it's a new house, but it's got to fit in with that. We're not asking you to build an 1880 home, but the architecture should reflect the ambiance of that area historical.
Seems
Okay,
like the concern is where the house is set on the property.
That's probably the number one concern.
That's the
and then-
number one
and then,
concern.
Again, I'm not, it's tricky because, again, the question of conformity isn't always easy to deal with, but in this case, I think the fact that the street is so, homogeneous in the sense of you go down John Street, it's a very special street, and that's just makes it that much more difficult to put something that is 21st century into, inserting it into the kind of the 19th century, so it is a tough challenge.
Okay, I'm going to move that we declare the proposed action a type 2 action.
All those, in second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. So your next job is go to the zoning board and meet with Sally and the other members of the zoning board for the needed variances. And then I move we continue the public hearing after that process.
Is there a second for the movement of the public hearing? Continue?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good night.
Thank you.
The next item is another public hearing. This is Rubicon RA Tarrytown LLC, 49 East Sunnyside Lane, site plan approval for various improvements for ADA compliance. Please take notice the Planning Board of Village of Tarrytown will hold a public hearing Monday, July 22nd, 2019, 7 p.m. in the Municipal Building, 1 Depot Plaza, to hear and consider an application by Rubicon RA Tarrytown LLC, 117 East Putnam Avenue, Riverside, Connecticut, for site plan approval of various site improvements for the ADA compliance. The property is located at 49 East Sunnyside Lane, Tarrytown, New York, and is shown on the tax maps as sheet 1-2.30, block 132, lot 47, and is in the OB zone. I won't read documents available, as I read before, by order of the Planning Board, Elizabeth Mazaris, Secretary of the Planning Board, dated July 12, 2019.
Good evening. Paul Berthet with the firm Fusion Engineering, representing the applicant, Rubicon RA Terry LLC, 449 East Sunnyside Avenue, the Tarrytown. Thank you, Chair, for describing the improvements. These are all generated by, to provide additional ADA compliance within the facility. And I could take you through all of the areas that we're proposing. I believe we're here tonight because we are in the OB zone with a compatible use permit, so any changes to the site plan would require a site plan approval. So just taking you through the site here, just to tell you where we're working. We're looking to provide handicap access at the King's Mansion, which is at the top of the hill. Provide a new or modification of existing rose garden into a more contemporary flagstone garden. We've designed stormwater to deal with the additional runoff from those surfaces for the patio. There's an additional change to the rear, one of the rear patios of the mansion to also allow handicap access from the building to have access to an outdoor patio area. That would be in the back corner, so it's just a matter of elevating the patio about 10 to 12 inches to eliminate a step coming outside.
This is from the King Building.
This is from the King Building, yeah. Yeah, there's two outdoor terraces. This is on the
But
left side.
this is on the south side of the building?
Yeah, that's actually the north side of the building.
Oh, that's in the front of the building.
Here's the building here. Here's the drop-off. So here's the back. There's a little back lawn area, so it's just one of the patios in the back.
Okay, it's hard to, all right, I see now.
We're providing a handicap access between guest rooms as we're moving on. So just do a switch back to make the grade compliant with 1 on 12, which is required for safe wheelchair access. Also, we're providing a handicap access down to the pool area from the outside. So there's our existing paths now, so we're just modifying what's there to be able to meet the appropriate grade for handicaps to get down to the lower elevation.
How do they go to the King House to the pool, you're saying?
So this is the King House.
Right.
Then you're gonna walk around, this is, the pool house is off to the left. So if King Mansion is at the top of the hill, there's a rose garden in front, and then all the way around to the south side of a residence building, guest suites building, is the pool, the outdoor pool. And then the last improvement, one of the last improvements is to provide access to the rose garden, so that there's a drop-off area for staging. We're adding, as part of this renovation, 2 existing conference spaces are being converted to guest suites. And there's an additional guest suite being proposed at one of the out parcel buildings adjacent to the rose garden. So there's a total of 3 new suites, new guest rooms. So it goes from a count of 214 to 217. We've provided you with an open space calculation to show that there's sufficient open space on the campus. It's a 26-acre site. Approximately 23 acres is open space. So there's enough.
Have you determined where you will put the 3 parking spaces that are needed for those 3 new rooms?
We've got additional parking right outside of the rose garden, and no other parking improvements are required, are proposed.
Dan, you've received the stormwater and erosion control plans. Have you had any comments you'd like to make about that?
Yes, actually, I'd just like to take one step back. You mentioned the additional 3 spaces. I don't believe we have that set of plans. That's a prior submission. Did you revise to include that? So for each additional room, you're required to provide a space, so. Is this yours?
Yeah, we're proposing 1 by the rose garden, and then this set doesn't show the other 2 that we're proposing, so we'll resubmit.
So there's going to be a revised set of plans to submit to us?
There will be.
Yes. I have seen the stormwater plans. Basically, the garden area that they're proposing is a lot of gravel and all permeable areas, underground systems. So they actually improving the site to better than what it is right now. I think we still have to wait for the parking plan. I don't know how you're going to address those stormwater for that, for those spaces.
Suzanne, landscaping?
Yes, also Ms. Nolan, I believe she gave you comments on the landscaping.
I will take a look at those.
There was a concern about the number of trees being removed between the pool and the lobby area. So.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's any major trees. There might be small landscape trees, but I'll take a look at our memo.
Are you planning landscaping at all, any additional landscaping?
Yeah, there's landscaping around the garden area that's behind the King Mansion, improvements along the rose garden, and then anywhere that there's other disturbance, there will be other landscape features.
You should show on a landscaping plan any trees that you're going to remove.
Sure.
And also the addition of the landscaping that you're going to provide.
Yeah, this whole plan started with a landscape plan, so I'm sure that maybe it just hasn't reviewed it yet.
On a totally aside issue, you may know the answer to this. Is 25 East Sunnyside part of your property? Is that an address there?
I don't think so. The owner of the facilities in the room also, Mr.
Excuse me?
The owner of the facilities in the room also, so.
So
just let you know.
25, what is 25 East Sunnyside? You don't know? Okay. Does anyone know?
No.
All right. I saw something in the newspaper saying 25 East Sunnyside Landing, and it said something about a restaurant there, and I can't understand. I thought
yeah, I saw that too, yeah.
a new restaurant opening up in Tarrytown, it said, on 25 East Sunnyside Lane. And I always thought it was part of the conference center, and they were opening up a restaurant in the building, and as opposed to, or changing the cellar, which is in the building, and making, but it's not related to you at all.
Well, we have a restaurant.
Yeah, I know.
Within the property, so it could be what you heard is that, but I don't know what the 25 Sunnyside Lane is.
Right. You're not changing the cellar, the current restaurant.
We're gonna stop using that as the primary restaurant.
I'm sorry, could you?
We're not gonna do any, we're not gonna do any physical alterations to the space that you're referring to as being the cellar, but that's gonna no longer be the primary restaurant in the facility.
But is a new restaurant coming in there?
There's another space where there already was a kitchen, which is gonna be the primary restaurant. So it was already a meeting banquet area. It was already a public space. But I don't know anything about the address change, so that part's new.
Did they file a building permit?
All right.
It could be the 25, I'm wondering if it's a little further up, just in Irvington, there used to be the deli at the corner. Is that possible?
No.
There was an empty space there.
It's too close. It's 25 as close as you can get to Broadway as possible. Unless it's on the other property where Mercy came in.
Well, that's 828 South Broadway, so I've never heard that 25 Sunnyside unless it's 49.
Could be
Let's
that,
say
it could be 49.
And perhaps if you saw it in the press, it was just a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to move that we declare the proposed action a type 2 action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Was this opened up to the public to see if there is anyone here to comment?
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone wish to speak on this application? Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
I will then move we declare the proposed action a type 2 action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And then I move we continue the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approved.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on.
Next item is another public hearing, Lions Pride, 14 North Broadway, 521 Bedford Avenue, for approved, site plan approved for a change of use to a mixed-use office retail on the lower level and 7 residential units within the existing structure. The property is located at 14 North Broadway, Tarrytown, New York, and is shown on the tax maps as sheet 1.80, block 41, lot 13, and is in the RR zone. Documents are available for inspection in the Planning and Zoning Office. I'll dispense with the rest of that. Additional approval is required by the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Architectural Review Board by order of the Planning Board. Elizabeth Mazzara, Secretary of the Planning Board, dated July 12, 2019. Okay.
Good evening, J.B. Hernandez, architect for the project, and representing Lions Pride. Also, Mr. David Lyons on one of the properties here as well. This property here, you're talking about 14 North Broadway, which also encompasses 12 Hamilton and 18 Hamilton. The property right now it's been empty for over 3 years. Used to have aesthetic school, and used to have some a dentist office here as well, and it's also in the rear that is currently being used. There's a 2-family dwelling. The property itself and the parking area have not changed. This is our 4 pictures from the year 2000 until today. So currently, the parking area is not changed at all, and it has between 27 and 28 parking spaces. It depends how it's being used, the 2 properties. What we're proposing is to have a change of occupancy for the property. So we're going to take the 2 front buildings in the lower level and the upper level and convert those into 7 dwelling units. We will maintain retail space along Broadway. Without We're not proposing any changes to the exterior of the building. All the changes are going to be interior. We were proposing is going to be restructuring or redesigning the parking area. Again, we're not increasing the parking, we're redesigning the parking to allow for better maneuvering in the area. So that will diminish of the number of parking spaces that we have available. So that brings us down to 21 parking spaces. And with the 7 units in the retail and the 2-family dwelling, we require to have 25. So that puts us in a deficiency of 4. Also, because this is a restricted retail, we will, and we're proposing to have a residential at the lower level. That brings us to also need a variance. So we're going to be in front of the zoning board as well.
Are the residential units rental units?
Yes.
Okay.
And the retail portion will be part of the first floor?
Yes.
Let me just clarify that. I'll interject, only because when we did the initial denial letter, that plan looks slightly different than our original review that was submitted on April 26th. And I actually indicated that it needed a use variance. So when you read the zoning code, my interpretation, because it's in the RR zone, it states that you can have a dwelling above a retail in the RR. So the issue becomes the dwelling above the retail, what percentage does that need to be? My view of it is that if it's greater than 50%, and we're talking about the front building, because the back portion of the building is all at grade, the front portion of that building, in my opinion, needs to be at least 51%, needs to be retail or reserved for such use. As shown in the original plans, they had only 185 square feet of area. So I think offering the applicant the opportunity either to seek the use variance or an interpretation of the code as to what does dwelling above a retail mean, or revise the plans to better reflect that 51% share of the floor space. So.
That's the slight change we have made. We enlarged what is the office area and the retail area downstairs. I'm not sure we're still close to the 51%, but we
So
will.
these plans are different than what you submitted to us?
No, these are the
Original?
These are the plans we submitted for this application. They're not the April 26 plans.
So what is the area of that retail on that first floor?
This is a 375 square feet, not counting the area. So we're getting, like I said, we're getting closer to the 51%.
So 375, you're close to that 51%?
Yes.
Okay. So your intentions, it seems to be to agree with my interpretation to change it to 51% of that floor area, therefore not requiring a use variance.
Right. So leave it a change of occupancy. Yep.
Okay.
So you just need the other variances that you mentioned before, but not a use variance.
Right.
You're gonna go to ZBA.
Yes.
Can we just go back to the site plan real quick? Sorry. We'd like to look at the site plan one more time. I've worked with the architect to modify the parking from the original. One of the benefits here is there's a large curb cut on Hamilton Place, and I had requested to have a one-way in and kind of a one-way back out. Would like to see incorporated along that sidewalk is a small planting buffer, so it's not a large parking area. Doesn't have to be wide, maybe just a few feet with some trees along the curb. Correct.
Yeah.
Right now,
Just-
it's a long driveway, I mean, it's all open.
Correct, it's probably all, what is that like, maybe 40 feet?
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
large, very long, I mean.
You see the,
So you would also probably want to do granite or whatever the curb cut specifications of the board are to do that. And you want to specify the width of the driveway. You've got one way going in, so just put the dimension on there to help, and then you have a in and out at the other end, and give us a dimension on that too.
Okay.
What are the size of the units that you're proposing?
The units are about between 700 square feet to 800 square feet each.
But what's the breakdown? They're all the same, or there's 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom?
They're 4 yes.
Sorry, say that again?
There are 4 one-bedrooms and 3 two-bedrooms.
And how big are the 2 bedrooms again?
The 2 bedrooms are, I believe I don't have the square footage per unit, but they're like 800. They do meet the...
There's a 915 square foot one bedroom on the first floor. The two bedroom units on the second floor are 604 square feet and 628 square feet. And there's a 955 square foot 2-bedroom unit on the third floor. And then at 12 Hamilton Place, they're converting the 1-bedroom unit. It's going to be a 1-bedroom unit of 620 square feet and a 2-bedroom unit of 1137.
1137?
So how many units, what
7.
is it now versus how many is it gonna be when it's done?
I don't think there's any
There's
residential.
No residential.
There's no residential.
No residential.
And so, can you just talk about the necessity or the reasoning behind 7 units on the property? First, could you talk about that?
Well, it was more looking as a rental unit. The property's been empty for 3 years. We did look at try to do different things with the property. In the layouts of the unit, which is, we're trying to do minimal work on the property, on the building. So we were trying to utilize what is there with the layout of the building. It's a very nice interiors of the building, so we're trying to minimize the work.
So there'd be no exterior changes to the building?
No
at
exterior
all?
change at all.
And Dan, could you comment on I think we discussed this briefly in the work session, but could you comment on the density question? Because I'm a little bit puzzled by the fact that you can put 7 units and there's absolutely no reference to the limit on that as far as it's related to parking? In other words, if you had the space, you could put 50, it wouldn't...
You determine density in the RR zone.
Yeah, this is an RR, this isn't your straightforward residential zone. It's a different zone, so there's no
right.
density that applies here. They're meeting the minimum requirements for room sizes according to the building codes. So that's really what's driving it.
But it's also related to parking, right? The available, each unit requires two spaces or something?
Well, yeah, it always comes down to parking.
So I think you're asking for parking variance for...
4.
4
4
spaces.
units, yeah.
4 spaces.
And what would be the difference in the tax structure on the property when it's completed?
That I will have to get back to you.
You can find that out, because just one of the things that I was concerned about, there was a property, another property that had, I think, 5 units in it, and when it goes over, it's considered commercial when it's above so many units. Is it 3-family, Liz?
Yes, 3-family. I think 3 families a different code is it will be considered an R2.
You know, Dan, there was a 5-family, and I think that I was just surprised the taxes on it was something like $16,000 on a 5-family, and it sold for almost $2 million. So I was just curious how that impacts the. It was on Wilde Street, and I'm just curious how that impacts the tax.
It's really probably the assessor does that, and I guess if they're rental, they determine it by income stream or whatever. That's how the assessor kind of does that, I think.
Yeah.
But 3 or more units are multifamily in the code.
Right, but
I don't know
the
if
question
it's
is how they're assessed, because I was just interested how that, we're trying to look at the overall physical impact of, when something's expanded, how's that going to affect the village, and certainly the tax structure on that would be something, would be interesting to know
Okay.
how that is gonna change. Because, you know, you're making an impact on the village, and if the taxes don't really change on it, I just think might be something we need to discuss.
You really have to talk to the town assessor on that and see how they determine it. And a lot of, it could be different in different towns, but I believe that rental is looked at the income
Right.
stream of it. And that's something you need to talk to the assessor about and get back to the board on.
Yeah, that would be an important part of this for me, just to see what the,
Do you know what the projected rents are?
No, no, no.
Or someone knows us know if they're proposing to
Yeah,
build them.
well, right.
I have the numbers, I just don't have them.
Okay.
Produce them at next.
It'd be great, appreciate that.
So, when you say there's no formal density in the RR zone, it's based on a number of square feet you're covering above the building. If you're putting up a building that has residents above it, the size of the number of square feet you're allowed to use as for residential is a function of the size of the retail.
It's the height and the bulk and
Right.
whatever. That's,
Right,
I
that's
guess,
what
where
it
you
is.
determine it.
And there's no, and in terms of, there's no code saying that a one bedroom has to be a certain size and a two bedroom, so it's up for grabs. So two bedrooms could be,
The building code has a minimum requirement for
450.
the bedrooms, but
for a size of a
for
bedroom.
the size of the bedrooms, but what they're proposing is all compliant.
Right.
Compliance.
I realize
The
that.
HUD requirement for a one bedroom, for a minimum size is 450 square feet, which are
Right.
And Dan, what's the code as far as the energy code for this? That's the latest code would apply to this when it's taken apart and put back together?
They're using the 2015 International Energy Code with the New York State Supplement, and if you recall, our local law number 5 of 2012 actually adopted those regulations in 2012 to be equivalent to what the code is today. So, they would have to meet the current standards of the energy code.
And do you have other ideas as far as energy efficiency and what you would plan on doing to the building to make it, you know, let's say, you know, an asset as far as its energy consumption rather than a drain on?
What we're trying to do with the building is basically keep it as much as unchanged as we can right now. And then we will do anything we can to comply with the energy code, but we were trying to minimize any work inside the building. And right now the building is, I mean, we can provide you and see what the energy efficiency or consumption is right now, but it seems to be
But you plan on doing anything as far as sustainability in the building, or, and, it just sounds like you're not really doing much.
No, we're not. No, that's the idea. I mean, like, we're not trying to, because we're trying to maintain the building as if,
But I mean, you're making a huge improvement to the bottom line of the building, but what I'm trying to say is what are you doing, for Tarrytown?
Okay, so we will take a look at that too.
I have a question. Currently, it's all offices, and do you have any history as far as occupancy goes? As far as it being an office building, has it been difficult to rent out office space in that building?
It has been fairly difficult. I did have to build it on the market, and it has been fairly difficult, because if you look down Broadway, there's a lot of empty space.
There is now, yeah.
My background is residential management, so I thought that this would be a really good project to really maintain the look and the feel of the building and the inside as well. And I invite anybody to come in and take a look at the details. We're gonna try and leave as much as possible, and the way that the building is laid out, it makes it conducive to the number of apartments and the layout of the apartments, incorporating there's an additional back stairwell that specifically, if you wanted to take it out, I left it in, just for that
It is a beautiful building. It's just a beautiful building. Yeah, it seems to be.
'Cause just as a general comment, one of the things we've had discussions about is that, you know, personally, as a resident of Tarrytown, I'm concerned about the erosion of our commercial stock of properties, because you know, the concern is as commercial properties become residential, they create more of a drain in general on the village services, and it impacts the, you know, the tax structure. And if you look across the county, generally, and again, this isn't scientific, but generally the communities that have a higher commercial tax base generally have a lower overall, you know, taxes on the residents. So the fact that you want to convert this to 7 units, it's not necessarily a problem, but we're just looking at how that impacts the village, because this is becoming a greater and greater concern to many, many residents in this community, how their taxes are affected by development. And even though this is, you know, I think it's great you're utilizing what's there, but the fact that you hadn't been able to rent it over a period of time, we don't know a lot of details on that. Because it sounds like if you haven't, for example, if you haven't made improvements to the building over time, it may not be competitive with people who are looking for a commercial rental. Give an example, you know, if it doesn't have the latest internet or latest technical, you know, technology involved in it, that can also be a detriment to renting. So that's what we're trying.
I think.
Yeah, I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying, but that, yeah.
It's fairly nice. They had the New York School of Aesthetics there.
Right.
Previously, in an office up on the top floor. The previous owner did a lot of work to it. So that was one of the part of the views of it, is that the minimal amount of work that was needed when I took over.
And I think I will provide the board with pictures of the interiors, and then you will understand why we.
But I'd be very interested in what the Greenberg tax assessor would have to comment on when the current situation versus the improved. That would be a great help to us to assess it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Anybody in the audience?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move that we declare the proposed action a type 2 action.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. So you go to the zoning board now for any needed variances, and then come back to us, so I move we continue the public hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. Is this motion on the public hearing?
Yeah, if you could just do that by motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the preliminary presentation. It's a continuation of that preliminary on Lexington 202 Group LLC, 29 South Depot Plaza. It's a referral by the Board of Trustees for the review of a petition for zone changes to allow for the development of 69 residential units above self-storage retail with parking.
Evening. For the record, my name is Stephen Rabel. I'm with the law firm of McCullough, Goldberger, and Stout. I'm here tonight with Paul Ferraro from Lexington, our planner Dave Smith, and our engineer Michael Mastro Giacomo. So, as you noted, we are before the planning board with a referral on a petition for a zoning text amendment that was sent back to you by the Board of Trustees. So we're here tonight to touch base on the associated site plan, give you an overview of some of the supplemental materials that you're going to be expecting in the coming weeks, and to ask that the board declare its intent to act as lead agency under SECRA and set a public hearing for next month. So the project itself, we've actually reduced the amount of self-storage use on the first floor. That's just a portion of the first floor. You'll recall that my client actually has a standing approval for pure self-storage, but we're now looking for transit-oriented mixed use on the site. So self-storage is a portion of the first floor, along with a retail component, an entrance lobby, and some residential facilities, above which are 69 residential units and approximately 73 full-time spaces associated with the site. Now that includes 32 spaces on site, as well as 41 spaces that are contracted for with the MTA, plus an additional 20 spaces on the MTA lot that are going to be available on nights and weekends. We've filed with the board a full set of plans as well as a full EAF. We understand that we have to get you some supplemental studies. So what I'm going to ask now is for Dave Smith, our planner, to walk you through some of the additional materials that we're going to be getting to the planning board.
Could you just tell me those numbers again for the parking? I went by
Sure.
them too quickly.
So it's 32 spaces on the property. We're contracting for an additional 40 full-time spaces
With the MTA?
with the MTA, as well as 20 part-time spaces, so nights and weekends.
And what's the description? What's the location of the spaces? I mean, the 32 I know are along the building, is that?
We're just to clarify, you're showing the on-site spaces, but not the off-site spaces.
These are our spaces on site, and then I believe the contractor spaces will be right across the street in the MTA property.
Across the street, across the road?
Across the road.
And is it possible to get more than that across the road bed from the MTA? In other words, the ratio you're proposing is now a little more than
one space per dwelling unit.
Per residential unit.
Per residential dwelling unit.
And if you
As well
included
as-
the storage, you need a few spaces for storage, right?
So they're proposing 2 loading spaces for the storage unit, but we would like to emphasize that this is really intended to act as transit-oriented development.
No, I realize that. We know that very well, because we're supporting more density because of that. But the question that we have been wrestling with, not just for this site, but on the station area project, is appropriate levels of density for everything in the station area, which includes this site. You're having to ask for a zone change to this site, different than might be applicable to the station area, but I just want to get some bearing without, as to what's possible here and in the rest of the station area. So if we're, normally we have a very high ratio of 2 parking spaces per residential unit. Now we're down to 1, and so that's in recognition of the fact that it's literally on the railroad track, so we understand that. So I just want to know, we're at 1-to-1 primarily, if you take in the fact that the storage area has to have a few spaces here and there.
They don't have.
And the retail has to have.
I don't really,
In a
I
memo-
believe that there was only a handful of spaces for self-storage. If they got the actual 93, and again, some is the part-time and whatever, that comes out to a ratio of 1.3 spaces per unit based on the 69.
1.3?
1.3.
You mentioned in a memo to us.
If you look at the whole 93 spaces, it's less if you take 20 away.
In a memo you sent to us, you said an additional 40 spaces will be available at night and on weekends for a total of 102 by use of shared parking. What would the shared parking be with?
Probably the restaurant. Actually, the spaces, if it's 32, Ron, if it's 32 spaces on site.
Right.
They talked about 40 spaces in the parking lot that were available all the time with the MTA. Then they talked about 20 spaces that would be available on the weekends and at nights. That's 93 spaces, not 104, so that's
Okay, so-
how I
so
get
there's-
the,
there's an error
that's
here
how I
in the
get the
memo.
1.3.
Yeah,
you know.
an error here, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, David Smith, Principal with Planning and Development Advisors, Project Planner for the team. I think part of what the questions that you're asking are all important questions, and I think one of the items that we will include as part of the expanded EAF is a supplement to the parking study that was prepared by JMC, and that'll evaluate all of the available parking resources within the project area, how they are configured, Also an evaluation of shared parking, because here you've got opportunities where different uses may have different peaks throughout the course of the day. So I think that will be, that'll be part of our supplemental submission to your board. In addition, there were a number of other matters or items that were discussed as part of the work session and in conjunction with input from your planning staff. And so I'd like to quickly run through the expectation of what we'll be preparing and submitting to you as part of a supplemental submission. The first would be a pedestrian circulation plan, focusing on the areas in and around the project site, looking at existing sidewalks, crosswalks, the platform access, and then there was some discussion about how this relates to the neighboring Franklin Court community. So we intend on evaluating that, most likely using an aerial and then superimposing all of the different pedestrian connections to show where there may be some gaps, and then how our proposed project would be enhancing the pedestrian environment in and around that area.
That should include that Butler building across the street, that's gonna be the restaurant pub.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
And there was also a suggestion that we evaluate this for conformity with the village's Complete Streets policy program. The second item was the parking issue that we had talked about, and we'll supplement the parking resource evaluation, looking at, again, the resources that are available here, but then also looking at other TOD projects within Westchester County, doing a desktop survey of best practices for TOD and parking management, so that you'll have a better understanding of how the parking can be best managed and appropriately planned. We'll have a preliminary fiscal analysis. Again, I think there have been other questions about other projects that you've been considering tonight, and we'll evaluate what the taxes are now and what the projected taxes will be once the project is finished. And then looking at some of the other potential impacts, school age, children generation, and then also on a preliminary basis, evaluating some of the tertiary impacts of disposable discretionary income, and that each household that moves into this community, on a projection, how much that income would be spent in the greater Tarrytown community. I think that's an important component to evaluating this project. There was a request to evaluate how this project would meet sustainability and green building practices, so we'll prepare a technical memo from our architect who will evaluate the measures that could be incorporated as part of the design. I think you've heard mentioned that the applicant is proposing a solar panels on the roof as an opportunity, and we want to get into some of the other building aspects included as part of the presentation. There's an update on the adequacy of existing utilities, and we'll need to coordinate with your village engineer. There is specific language in the code that says that we need to make a representation that all new sewer, water, and traffic impacts generated from the proposed project can be reasonably mitigated. So there will be a technical memo from our engineer responding to those matters. The next item would be the preparation of visual models of the proposed project in its relationship to Depot Plaza. So we'll have our architect prepare kind of a photo simulation that will provide some indications of what the project will look like. The next item would be an evaluation of providing information on density, and I think that was a request that you had made as part of our work session. There aren't specific requirements in the zoning code as currently proposed, so we'll prepare an evaluation, include that with the next submission. And then lastly, preparation of impervious surface calculations, both pre and post-construction. So, Mr. Chairman, those are the items that you can expect from the project team as part of the next submission for your evaluation moving forward.
Will we have that for our work session, or it's too soon?
Work session is when?
A couple of weeks.
It's the second, I believe it's the second Thursday of the month.
Is that August 14th?
I think 15th.
We will make every effort. to get you what you need in that time.
Whatever you have will be useful to,
Yes.
be able to go over that.
Yes.
There's one question that's always annoyed me about this property. The recycling company in the past has always parked trailers, not the cabs, but the trailers, along that roadbed continuously at different points in time and different numbers. What is gonna happen? Is that like, do you have a restriction in your ownership that land can't, or the parking areas along that roadbed cannot be used for parking tractor trailers? Because it's a private road.
That's correct.
And will it remain a private road with 70 residents living
Well,
on it?
it's their access, everyone else has an access easement through there to get to the back. So actually, this applicant owns that driveway all the way up to Depot Plaza around the bend.
You own that land now? The driveway all the way past,
Yeah.
until the
Yes, I
end of your
believe so.
building,
So-
until the end of that loading dock?
Yeah, so where's the, just out of curiosity, where is the area of concern with the trailer parking?
Where your hand is.
Within the, right here?
Well, it started at the very beginning of the driveway or the
Adjacent to lot
roadbed.
37.
Okay.
North, the very northern part of that, as you entered, along the Butler Building on that side, and also, actually, if I remember, it was probably in front of the housing on that side. But it extended at different times up and down that roadbed. Plus, the roadbed's condition, obviously, is now your responsibility. They'd have to put a new roadbed in there.
That was,
The prior site plan approval addressed that road that was to be redone, provide new drainage, curbs, and so
Right.
on.
by them.
So they know that, right?
So
Okay.
what I'd like to add to that note, since you're on that topic, I know we discussed, Mr. Smith brought up the circulation of traffic and pedestrian. I think you need to be a little bit creative, because this is a different type of use compared to the prior use of the self-storage. So the 32 spots that you have adjacent to the building, I would like to see a sidewalk along the building, so that way the pedestrians don't have to walk out to the street, and they can walk in between the vehicles and the building safely into the building. Because there is that constant traffic circulation of trailers and vehicles going through there. So I think you have to be a little creative. Maybe if it requires a variance from the standard 9x18 spots, that might be something we need to consider. Go to a compact, perhaps a 8x15, but we need some safety for the pedestrians getting out.
And obviously, you want to show the
Well,
aisle
it
widths.
also affects the roadbed, though. The width of that roadbed is diminished. And that's not an easy matter if you have large trucks going into the back of that property, along that access road.
Again, as part of the circulation, you want to show the aisle widths and whatever. Is there something else we can do with the MTA property? Do you have the ability to improve the curbing and other kinds of things on the MTA property for the parking lot improvements?
Yeah. We'll look into those issues for you, absolutely.
I had one other, the visual models, to get back to the chairman's comment, those would include both Lot 37 as well as Lot 38.
Yes.
And the density, I assume that you're going to be looking at comparable TOD sites throughout Westchester and see exactly what the ratios are there.
So unless the board has any additional questions, we would ask that the board declare its intent to act as lead agency and set the public hearing for August, and we're gonna work on getting you as much of those materials as we can.
Anybody have any questions back there?
I have one question. Is this going to be modular construction? Or is it going to be wood?
According to the plans, they indicated type 5A, if I am correct, which is any materials approved by the code, which is wood.
anything would.
So,
Yeah,
onto
okay.
that same note, I think there's got to be, has to be some consideration to the wall that's right adjacent to the railroad property. It should be of non-combustible materials, and also that there's something with noise retardancy. We can't, I mean, the residents being right on the railroad, I think you want to avoid that.
You're going to have to do probably triple pane windows and things like that.
Yeah, we'll look at those issues as well.
Do you want more separation between the wall and the building, or?
As long as it's code compliant.
Okay, I'm going to move that the planning board declare the proposed action an unlisted action and indicate its intent to be lead agency for the review of the zoning petition and for the site plan review, with proper notification to involved and interested agencies and to the Westchester County Planning Department for review under GML, the General Municipal Law.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. And then I move that we set a public hearing at our next,
You want
No, go ahead, Ron.
move that we set a public hearing at our next meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I just had a brief, some comments on their submitted EAF, Part 1. I found some issues on it.
Mhm.
Not major, but I thought there was something about, first of all, there was a comment about the LWRP. The village does not have an LWRP. You didn't pick it up in the mapper, and I think there's a long history to that. The village has currently had an LWRP that I think Smith from Buffalo or whatever tried to do, and that didn't go anywhere, but the village administrator is working with POS, but we don't have a LWRP, even though there's something in the code about consistency, there's no plan. On page 3, questions C3 zoning. Is a zoning change requested as part of the proposed action? You indicated no. Obviously it is, and yes, and it's a text change to allow proposed use, you know, for the projected project. The other thing is, I think that was okay. I think that was the only thing that I actually saw about the zoning.
Well, since we're on, I'd like to add on page 11, you indicate that it is not within the 100-year floodplain. Actually, it is.
It's interesting because the mapper doesn't pick it up.
Yeah, I think, as Bob mentioned, when you use the mapper program, it automatically fills in some of these
It's not
boxes, so we can go back.
necessarily
Right, right.
Oh, you
So,
can't blame it on the technology.
well, I do it when I can, so, yeah. But we can go back and clarify, and
So
I'll
just
coordinate
make
with that before it goes out. Thank you.
Chairman.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, can you please set the escrow? They do?
Did you?
4?
We did it? We did it already?
We could do it at the public hearing, they already have.
Oh, at the
existing
public hearing,
escrow.
all right.
Because we're going to have a public hearing. and we'll do it.
All right. Okay, motion to adjourn? All those in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
For 20,000.